Okay, hello. We're going to get started. We might have some other folks that RSVP join us as we go, but yeah, we'll just like to get started. So welcome to the Intro to Good Food workshop. We're excited to have you here. My name is Jess Schellenberg, and I'm the Good Food Campus Lead for Western Canada. I'm from Lekwungen and Wasanic Territory. And Jamie, if you could just go to the next slide, please, or Brittany. Thanks. With the one before. Thanks. So I'm from Lekwungen and Wasanic Territory, and with that, I want to acknowledge my unwarranted privileges as a white settler on these lands. As we explore the food system in relation to colonization later in the presentation, it's important to remember its ongoing and systemic nature in all areas of society. Something that we can do to respond is respond to calls to action made by Indigenous people and build relationships with the Indigenous peoples and communities around us. And I'll pass it to Jamie to introduce.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie, and I'm Meal Exchange's Network Engagement Coordinator. I'm joined in Toronto by different computer screen by my colleague Brittany, who's the Good Food Campus Lead. We're currently settlers on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. As we get started with this workshop, we'd encourage you to acknowledge the truth and history of the land you occupy today and how we can be more accountable to these truths and to reconciliation as we go through this work in the food system. Can you change the slide? Thanks. So starting with just a few logistics, just so you know, we'll be recording today. We won't be recording during the question and answer period though. Just please keep yourself on mute unless we're doing discussion, just to avoid the background noise. And feel free to message the chat with your contact info so that we can keep track of who's here. Next slide. Thanks. So a little bit of an intro to Meal Exchange. Meal Exchange is a national charity that empowers students to use food to build healthy, just, and environmentally sustainable communities in Canada. We've been around for over 25 years, and we were really founded on the premise of using food as a way to create social change. Over time, our work has taken different shape, responding to the needs of the student community at over different time periods. However, the core tenets of what we do are the power of food and the power of students. So we know food is a powerful way to address some of the most compelling social challenges and environmental problems of our time. And we work with awesome student leaders like yourself who can make that change happen. Some of our core activities include locally based campus chapters that run different programming, including projects around student food insecurity and food sustainability, like the Good Food Challenge, which we'll discuss later today. We also aim to connect the efforts of the student food movement across the country through campaigns like this one, as well as our annual National Student Food Summit, which is taking place this year in August. And now I'll pass it off to Jess for a bit of a Food Systems 101.
Okay, hi. So I'll be exploring some key terms now to give folks some background about food systems. These are by no means the only terms that matter in relation to food, but there's some that we thought that were important to explore. So the first thing we'd like to ask is what a food system means to you. So we'll give you a minute to type this into the chat, and it can be brief and just type your initial thoughts in there. We'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, great. So I see your definition there. That's great. That's very similar to what we have as well. So food systems vary across political and cultural lines in terms of the way that they're structured. But in general, a food system encompasses all those activities related to the production, so cultivation, rearing, and capture, processing, so refining and manufacturing, distribution, referring to transportation, sale and retail, preparation, and of course, the consumption of food. The key here is to think of the food system as connected to where and how the food system or the food is grown, and then all the way to its consumption. So from seed to plate, but to know that they can look very different depending on the context. The next term we wanted to go over was food security. So it's a commonly used term in food systems work. And one definition that we find really useful was developed by the Ryerson Center for Studies in Food Security. It's called the 5 A's of food security. So this refers to availability. So students or people have sufficient food for all people at all time. Accessibility, physical and economic access to food for all at all times. Adequacy, access to food that is nutritious and safe and produced in an environmentally sustainable way. Acceptability, access to culturally acceptable food which is produced and obtained in ways that does not compromise people's dignity, self-respect, or human rights. And agency, the policies and processes that enable the achievement of food security. So in relation to students, 76% of students disagree that food on campus helps them maintain a healthy diet, and 64% reported that healthy food options are unaffordable to them. So these are some big issues that we're looking to tackle. So the next term is food justice. So food justice has a variety of definitions and contexts to be considered. Primarily, though, it focuses on racialized, gendered, and economic barriers in food production and consumption. It's a lens that folks can use to analyze both international and domestic supply chains because injustices occur throughout every level of the food system. A key component of food justice are questions of who has access and control over how and where the food is produced, as well as how the land is considered. Just food systems in this way take into account sustainability for both communities and the earth. So again, in relation to campuses, these issues can create food insecurity, which disproportionately impacts students with children, Indigenous, racialized, and international students, further increasing the barriers to accessing education. Food sovereignty encompasses decision-making power and control over a people's food system. So it's related, but it also encompasses the right to democratically determine their own food and agricultural policies. So it includes food security, but it also encompasses a political and deeply social element to it in terms of a nation or a people's ability to determine what their food systems look like. So there's no single way to define food sovereignty, but most often there's a focus on regaining control over Indigenous food systems following colonization in a way that connects with local Indigenous ecosystems and economies. There are also often embedded values of giving, sharing, trading, and land care as central pillars to Indigenous food systems. The central goal of European colonization, to give some context, was and is to dispossess Indigenous peoples from their land, and thus also dispossessing them of access to control over their diverse food systems. Imperial perspectives defined Indigenous lands often as terra nullius, and that just means empty land or unused. And this concept was used to justify the expulsion of Indigenous people from their territories unjustly. So in response, many Indigenous people and organizations are challenging these notions. La Via Campesina, for example, is an international movement that values food sovereignty and builds solidarity amongst many diverse groups. And the goal is to build momentum to defend peasant agriculture, food sovereignty, and social justice, including Indigenous people, migrants, farmers, landless people, and rural women and youth. The National Farmers Union and the Union Paysanne are the two Canadian members of La Via Campesina. So conventional food, this is another term that's important because crops can be considered conventional when they use synthetic chemicals such as fertilizers and pesticides, and they often seek to create maximum efficiencies throughout the production process. So the ultimate goal, more often than not, is to produce maximum crop yields and maximum profit. This can include seeking efficiencies within space and feed when it comes to animal agriculture as well. There are often many negative impacts of conventional agriculture when it does not take into account the people and the earth. This can include environmental degradation, so for example, soil depletion, habitat loss, insect and pollinator deaths, as well as poor working conditions for food producers and poor living conditions for animals, for example, on concentrated feeding operations. Some other stats associated with this are that under conventional agriculture, soil is depleting more than 100 times faster than it can rebuild itself. Also, 33% of global fish stocks are being overfished and are unlikely to be restored in the near future. In contrast to conventional agriculture, seeing a farm as an ecosystem refers to the planning of farms to act like and interact with ecosystems. So instead of chemical inputs, energy flows such as water, sunlight, and nutrients are harnessed via nature in order to make crops healthy. Indigenous people around the world have grown and continue to grow food in this way. So it's important to know that because this was the case before this term took hold in Western academics and science. Something to keep in mind for context for this term as well is that agroecosystems minimize nutrient losses from the system through relatively closed systems. So they keep nutrients and in the system and cycling through it. They also promote functional biodiversity and species diversity for optimum health. So we'd just like to take this opportunity to ask you if any terms were missing that are important to you, or if you would like to understand anything better. So you can input that into the chat and we'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, great. So if at any time you do think of a term, you're welcome to input it in there as well. So the next section is called Power in Food. So we're going to explore some of the power dynamics within the food system. The first part of this section is a short history of food from colonization to industrial food. And the goal of this timeline is to reflect the connection between colonization and the industrialization of the food system, which has now led to corporate consolidation or concentration of corporate control in present day. So the timeline reflects what's called food regime theory. We're not going to discuss this in great detail at this time, but essentially what that does is it breaks down our food system historically in order to reflect the different concentrations of political power that have controlled our food systems over time. So to begin, between 1870 and 1930, settler colonies around the world had been established by European countries, and the combined tropical imports as well as grains were directed to Europe. This global colonial economy then led to increasing urbanization and the emergence of European industrial classes in European cities. So as time went on, traditional agricultural networks and economies were wiped out in many cases, while international trade and private property laws became entrenched globally, favoring European development. After World War II, the US became the new global superpower, and production shifted again to facilitate large-scale industrial farms, such as that for animal agriculture. Many industries that are now central to conventional agriculture were also born from the war. For example, DDT, which is now actually banned in many parts of the world, became a widespread pesticide for many years and was originally used to kill lice among soldiers during World War II. And it also had other uses in the military. So in this way, the military-industrial complex facilitated its widespread distribution, which then enabled its use as a pesticide later on. And in this way, chemical weapons and technologies in the military are deeply connected to the pesticide industry. In 1950s to 1970s, we saw the rise of modern capitalism and mass industrialization, and this was again coupled with free trade principles in the market. This is now all accumulated into a neoliberal and globalist economy, which essentially favors deregulation of corporations, free trade, and corporate freedom in the marketplace, which has led to corporate consolidation of the food system, meaning that large corporations are able to buy up smaller businesses and also control the market. So I'm going to pass it off to Brittany now, who's going to explain what that actually looks like on the ground.
Currently, only a handful of companies control the way that most of our food is produced, processed, distributed, and in general, what food is actually made available to us. So you'll see at the top of the slide here, we have 5 corporations that control the majority of seed and agrochemicals around the world that are used, and they've been consolidating over time. That means that these 5 companies are controlling most of the way that food is produced. On the bottom of the slide, you'll see 10 companies that control most major food brands. So those are the people that are controlling what is made available to you and how it is produced at every major grocery store, or say on campus or other places where you access food. It's really important to pay attention to corporate control over food because it can have a significant impact throughout the food system. I'm just going to give you one example of the impact that has in Canada. So currently, the National Farmers Union is resisting attempts by multinational seed companies to control seeds through a project called Seed Synergy. This project would actually require that farmers pay royalty fees each year they use the seeds developed by large companies, even if they grow and save the seeds on their own farms. This would obviously make farming way more expensive at the expense of farmers towards profits of large corporations, and this would seriously impact the ability for organic or ecological farmers to save and grow new seed varieties, and overall this would decrease the amount of biodiversity that we have on Canadian farms. So again, just to bring home the fact that corporate control can be really significant in our food system, and there are probably many different examples of the impacts that has. So we talked about who controls our food, but I want to talk a little bit about who actually grows our food. Often we hear that big agriculture or corporate food is more efficiently produced and therefore can more effectively feed the world. In reality, the majority of the world actually depends on food produced by small-scale producers. And actually, this food is produced on much less land than what we would call big food. Another important point to say here is that the main concern for industrial food production is profit, which often comes at the expense and the exploitation of food producers and workers around the world. For example, coffee farmers receive less than 10% of the retail price for coffee beans and have little power in determining coffee prices and contracts. Again, that's for the actual beans, so it's much less, say, for a cup of coffee. Unfortunately, also it's important to mention that forced child labor is very prevalent in coffee production. Again, it's because the main motive here is profit and not necessarily the well-being of food producers throughout the system. To turn our sights over to Canada, the picture is really not that different. Corporate control over food is also significant. On average, farmers spend 95% of their revenues on farm inputs like seeds, chemicals, and equipment from these major agricultural corporations, and to bank debts, leaving them with just 5% of their profits at the end of the year. So their profits would be what they sell within a given year of vegetables, for example, and they only receive 5% of that after they pay off all their expenses at the end of the year. It is also important to note that only 7% of the farms make up the majority of national farm profits, meaning that a small number of large farms really dominate the market. Overall, small scale and family farms are really struggling to keep up with the costs of farm inputs, debts, and competition with big farms and industrial and imported food. As a result, we have lost 1/3 of our family farms in the last 30 years in Canada. Unfortunately, the picture is also similar for small scale and community fisheries, which have been struggling to compete with commercial fisheries across the country, or on the coast, I should say. Again, another thing that's important to note is that our food production in Canada depends largely on migrant farm workers that are underwaged, experience precarious working conditions, and are often unable to access an immigration pathway or face many barriers if they are able to face that find a pathway to immigration in the first place. To take it down to the next level, to how it's relevant to us, I want to talk a little bit about campus food. So who controls campus food? As you may already know, there are three major companies that control most food on Canadian and actually North American campuses. Those are Chartwells, Aramark, and Sodexo. If you don't already know who controls the food on your campus, I would suggest that you ask around and find out. Contracts with these companies, these food service provider companies, are often strict and focused on profit rather than, say, providing food that meets the needs and wants of students. Often, the way that they make their money is actually from buying food from certain suppliers over others, sometimes through rebates that they get, making it very difficult to shift towards, say, more healthy or more sustainable options, because again, the primary motive and the primary way that they create profits is actually not through providing food to students. And so their contracts can be very, very strict. As a result, some campuses have been deciding to move to operate their own food services, which we called self-operated food services or self-op. That's not to say that this necessarily means that students get everything they want in those circumstances, but those contracts are often a little bit more flexible, but it depends on the university or the college itself in what their priorities are when operating that food service. It is really important to know who controls our food on campus or anywhere else if we want to be able to ask for changes and actually hold them accountable. We need to know who they are. So I just wanted to tell you this stat, which I think is really interesting, that campus food services actually generate over $1 billion in sales each year on Canadian campuses alone. So what I want you to do is to take a minute just to think about that. $1 billion is a lot. And what would happen if we invested that $1 billion into a different kind of food than we currently are? What if it was directed towards local, sustainable, just food systems or other values that you deem important when you're looking for food? What might change? What might change in your life, on your campus, in your community, in your region, or let's say in the global food system? Take a minute, think about it, and type some quick answers into the chat. Thank you. Those are some really great answers and definitely along the lines of what we've been thinking. Yeah. So feeling better about the food options available on campus, absolutely. Yeah, these are really great answers. Absolutely. So, if there's more local control over food systems, benefit to the local economy, we would hope also a benefit to like more workers, more accountability for food workers, safer working conditions, definitely more seasonally appropriate produce, and local smaller scale farms with which has less of an impact on the climate. These are really great answers. So the next thing that we're gonna talk about is reclaiming the food system. So building on what we've learned about how the food system has been shaped and controlled, mostly by corporate powers, we're going to now discuss a vision to actually take back some of that power to shape the food systems around some of our values and some of the values that you've just outlined in the chat there. So people have been imagining over the last while what a better, more just food system could look like. And this is our first attempt at creating what we call like a good food system and highlighting some of the things that we really believe should be included in that vision. I want you to each take a second to look at it, think about them. If there's anything missing from our vision, feel free to put that in the chat, or we can talk about it afterwards, because again, we want this to be informed by students themselves and what they want their campus food to be working towards and representing a different vision of the food system. As we're all learning, the food that we eat has a great impact on our environment, our communities, food producers, and of course ourselves. The reality is that we often don't have access to food that meets our values and the values that, for example, that we've put up on the slide there. What we are trying to do at Meal Exchange is actually to take back control of the systems that are within our reach and change them to make those better choices available to us so that we can leverage our combined purchasing power of $1 billion a year to our vision of a better food system. To achieve this vision of a better food system or a similar vision, first, what we need to do is define what that vision is we've attempted to do that here. And then actually define what food upholds that vision and hold public institutions like campuses accountable to purchasing foods that are available towards that vision. So of course, not everything is available currently that supports what we're looking for, but we're trying to nudge our food systems towards that and towards progress. One of the major ways that we do that at Meal Exchange is through a program called the Good Food Challenge. In general, we try to empower students to ask their campuses to lead the way in building more sustainable and just food systems. We challenge and help campuses change their food purchasing over time and provide students the opportunity to actually help track and inform changes to hold their campuses accountable. As you've probably noticed yourself when you're looking for more sustainable or socially just food options, it can be quite confusing. There are many different claims, labels, certifications, et cetera out there. So to offer campuses a standard definition for good food in response to that problem, Meal Exchange worked with advisors and students a couple of years ago to develop what we call the Good Food Guide that outlines our values and how to actually identify what food upholds those values. Right now, I'm going to go through the main pillars we see as defining good food. I won't have time to go into all the details because it can get quite complex, but I encourage you to look through these slides afterwards when we send them out to you and reach out if you have any questions. And if you want to see our detailed good food guide or want to talk about it, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. So the first pillar here is called community-based. Generally, community-based food is produced within the campus's province by small to medium-sized businesses. An important aspect of this pillar is actually transparency, in that we can identify the farms or fisheries that produce the food. The aim of this pillar is really to support local economies and communities in the regions in which we have campuses. If food meets any of the values, upholds any of the pillars that I'm defining, it counts as good food. It doesn't have to meet all of them. I think that's an important point. As we go to the next slide, which is a bit different. So socially just food. Socially just food guarantees that food producers receive fair compensation for their products and have fair and safe working conditions. So the most common example on a campus you would see socially just food would be like say fair trade coffee or chocolate. The next one is ecologically sound. Ecologically sound food is produced using environmental stewardship practices that promote soil health, biodiversity, and crops, seeds, and wildlife, ecosystem conservation, and as well as reduces the use of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides in operating. The next one after this is humane. Humane food ensures that animals are raised in a way that accommodates for their health and natural behaviors, provides free access to appropriate food and water, and minimizes stress and harm. And last but not least, it is important that we make sure that good food is accessible and affordable for all students so that they are able to eat with dignity, sustained by affordable, nutritious, and culturally appropriate food. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie now to explain how we can actually make the changes that we want in the food system happen on campus through our new campaign, Good Food for All.
So the Good Food for All campaign is all about mobilizing on this need to address student food insecurity, which we know is very prevalent on campuses, as well as reclaiming power in the food system by using our collective purchasing power. So Meal Exchange is excited to support awesome student campaigns to really lead this work on their campuses across the country. So the core demand that students will be calling for during the Good Food for All campaign is for the president or highest level decision-making person on their campus to sign the Good Food Campus Commitment. So the commitment is the first step for a campus to participate in the Good Food Challenge, which Britt mentioned briefly earlier. And the Good Food Challenge really ensures that students are involved and at the forefront of making changes in campus food purchasing. The commitment also allows students to hold campuses accountable to making these changes, as well as to increase transparency of their claims about the types of food they're purchasing. It's also an opportunity for campuses to really show a commitment to student well-being and to show their leadership within the food system. Really the core asks of the commitment are to commit to purchasing 20% good food by the year 2025. That's 20% of their total operating food budget, as well as making good food more accessible and affordable to students. Just before we walk through, exactly what the campaign is, I just wanted to say, I'm so excited to work with awesome student organizers like yourself, and I really have no doubt that you know your student community best and that you can pull off an awesome campaign. But I just want to say we're also here for you to provide support in a variety of ways. So we have a campaign guide that we can send out after this call. This really walks you through planning a campaign from A to Z. We'll be convening national calls for the network of campuses running this campaign so that they can troubleshoot together and connect over the success they're seeing, as well as to have a national call to celebrate after the campaign all the awesome stuff that you folks have done. The National Student Food Summit this summer is also a place to connect and celebrate all the great work, as well as to plan for future campaigns in the coming year. We're here to provide you with individual coaching and support. So Jess, Britton, and I are all able to provide you, with strategy for basically every element of running a campaign, but especially for navigating, those harder meetings with your food service providers or with the president of your university. We can support with outreach if you're running different events, as well as financial support for small campaign costs such as printing and food. Just of course, connect with us to discuss this before making purchases. So I'm going to go through the key planning steps of the campaign, which are all outlined in the guide as well. And there's many more resources attached to each of these steps within the guide, but it'll be just good to go over a high level today. So basically from now until March, there's 5 key steps. So first is attending this workshop. So you can check that right off your list. The next is to solidify your organizing team, the team of students leading this work on your campus, as well as to build partnerships and let others know about the campaign. The next is to begin engaging with your president, to begin mobilizing the petition for the Good Food Campus commitment to show broad student support, as well as to begin planning a Good Food Week event. So that leads us to Good Food Week, which is taking place March 16th to 20th this year, where students will have the opportunity to host, one or more events if they'd like, and all of these events taking place during the same week. These are an opportunity to gather more petition signatures. And this all sort of leads up to March 20th, which is the day of action, where all campuses will deliver their campus petitions and in a letter to their president's office. So I'll skip ahead to step number 2, since you're already, at the workshop right now in the training. So once you've attended the workshop, it's time to solidify your core organizing team and to register your campaign. So we usually suggest a team of 3 to 6 people. Any more or less can be tricky to manage, but it's possible. We also think a small team of 2 students can also work, and we can help you and support where you need extra capacity. There's 3 key areas that we recommend to kind of break up this team. So folks that lead communications and outreach, folks that lead the events, and folks that lead the volunteer management. So these are all, more manageable, smaller tasks that can contribute greatly to the success of your campaign. And, you can let us know if you're interested in taking on a role like this by either, emailing us afterwards, or we'll be sending around a survey where you can let us know as well. And even if you're not fully committed to that yet, we'd just love to know if you're interested, and we can take it step by step. So at the same time, and after you've solidified your organizing team, it's important to begin to map out potential partners and stakeholders on campus. On top of student support for the commitment, it's super helpful to have the support of different departments and faculty, such as student unions, related student groups, sustainability offices, etc. In the campaign guide, we've provided an activity to help you map out the stakeholders on your campus and really take the time to get the sense of your campus system. And really the first step to beginning to engage with these new partners, or maybe existing partners if you're connected on campus, is to reach out to co-sign a letter to the president. So every good campaign combines the mobilization of the community, which in this case is the student community on your campus, as well as relationship building with the target of your campaign, which is the president in this case. So the first step, as I mentioned, is to send a letter to the president asking for a meeting. We have a template email and letter to the president for your group to work from. Asking other campus partners to show their support of the letter by signing is a great way to include other folks in the work. We recommend sending the letter no later than 3 weeks from this workshop to give plenty of time to hear back. Really, the length of time it'll take for you to hear back can vary by campus, and it's good to remain patient. Following up is always really important, so you can follow up via email. If you're able to, you can also phone the president's office. If you're really having trouble, there's other strategies like trying to find the phone numbers of different folks within the office of the president, such as, the president's assistant or things like that. Connect with us if you're having trouble, and we have lots of different strategies up our sleeve. Once you've secured a meeting with the president, set up a call with us to chat strategy, and we'll give you a little bit of more of a briefing and to provide you with some presentation slides to show them, which you can cater to your own campus group. The next piece of the campaign is the petition. So this is really, petitioning is a great way to show broad student support for the campus commitment. Each live campaign will have their own campus page on this website that houses your campus petition and shows any events you might be running during the campaign. Having a digital platform allows us to connect all the different petitions happening across the country, as well as to save paper on the ground. So we'll be training all campaign organizers to actually access the back end of this platform, which is called Nation Builder. So this will allow you to set up events on your page, to see all the folks who have signed your petition, and to send petition signers follow-up emails after, during, and throughout the campaign. When people sign the petition, they also have an option of checking off if they'd like to volunteer. So this is a great way to recruit volunteers as well. So there are many ways to make sure that you engage lots of students on your campus to sign the petition. In the guide, we provide lots of resources and recommendations on how to use these different strategies such as tabling, postering, canvassing, and class talks to get petition signatures. And this also allows you to recruit volunteers and to spread news about your Good Food Week event at the same time. We encourage most campaigns to table at least twice to get the petition out there in the months up to Good Food Week. Tabling is also a great chance to learn more about your student community's thoughts about food on campus and to be really connected to the community as you do this work. As you know, probably social media is also a really great way to engage new students in creative ways. We've provided you with some sample social media graphics that can work to increase petition signatures and draw attention to events you might be running. We encourage you to explore using storytelling in combination with this method because, you know, sharing why you care about student food security and sustainable food can be very compelling to draw others in and, you know, nudge them to sign the petition. This is also a really great chance during this campaign to break free from just communicating in an academic way and writing academic papers. You know, you can communicate your message and get the petition out there on different fun and creative platforms. And I'd encourage you to explore those ideas and share them with us as you come up with them. The last most important time to gather petition signatures is Good Food Week. So that's, as I mentioned before, taking place from March 16th to 20th this year. Student-run campaigns will host local events. So we have a selection to choose from, and we'll support you if you don't want to run one of these events that we've listed and that I'll go through quickly, and you have another awesome idea, we'd be happy to support you in planning that event as well. And this all leads up, as we mentioned before, to the day of action on March 20th, where we'll all collectively deliver letters to the president with the petition signatures. So I'm going to take us through just a high level of each event type, but I'd encourage you to see the campaign guide after this call to see a little bit more about what each event requires to plan, as well as the resources available to you. So Let's Cook Good Food is a community kitchen type event focused on a theme of your choosing around good food. These events are a really great way to practice cooking skills, build community and connection through food, and raise awareness about sustainable, accessible, and just food systems. You can make these community kitchens have a theme. For instance, you know, when Brittany mentioned all the different pillars of good food, you could focus your kitchen on local food or sustainable food or, you know, cooking on a budget, things like that. So we'd be happy to support you in identifying a theme for your cooking workshop. The next event is a banner drop about good food. So this is a really great way to draw visibility to your petition and to the campaign in general on campus. Running a banner drop usually involves an event to paint the banner, which you should have your design planned ahead of time, and then the drop itself during Good Food Week. To increase the effectiveness of your good food banner, we recommend pairing it with another action. So this could be either a media statement or a press release sent to your local media or campus newspapers to draw attention to the movement beyond the banner, behind the banner, as well as to some other options are to combine the banner drop with a tabling event or to run a Good Food for All rally after the banner drop in the same week. A rally for good food is a great awareness raising event where you can bring together a crowd to chant about good food, listen to passionate speakers, including having students speak to the importance of the Good Food Campus commitment at your school. Rallies are often held outside or in a busy area on campus where you can really draw visibility in a crowd and bring more folks into the movement. The next event we can support you to run is Sharing the Table, where a meal turns into a community experience to really reimagine what campus food looks like. So the idea behind this is to set up a table in a high traffic cafeteria and to set it up nicely, you know, with a tablecloth, with plates, decor, any sort of creative banner or anything like that. And you can invite other people to join you, students and your campus partners, to share food and conversation, really building momentum and drawing visibility to the movement. The premise is really simple because you're just, setting up a table and reimagining what campus food can be and talking about what that can be. And this is impactful because you can draw other people that might be in that busy area in to talk about it. So those are the 5 main events we have resources on, but like we said, we're happy to support folks to plan all sorts of events. In the guide itself, there's a bunch of just general event tips. I'm just gonna highlight a few really important ones today. So event accessibility, there's lots of things to consider to make sure your event is accessible to all. So check out the resource we have. It's an accessibility checklist. And these are good things to start planning early on. One of the first things you do when you plan an event should be to keep in mind accessibility. For food, so when possible, it would be great to showcase good food at your events. So looking for local, organic, or fair trade products are a good place to start. And if you need support with that, we have some experience with sourcing that kind of food on campus, because as we know, it might not be, and that's kind of the point of the campaign, is that it might not be accessible as it is now. It's also good to be sure that you have food options that accommodate a variety of different dietary needs. Next important tip for all student events is outreach. So this is essential to the turnout for your event. Utilize the network of your volunteers and your social circle. And we have a variety of outreach materials we've provided to ensure good turnout, whether it's social media graphics or printout posters. Be sure to check the guide for that. Good Food Week is also a great time to get media attention. What you're doing is really cool, so reach out to your campus and local newspapers to cover it. We've provided a sample media release to help you out and would be more than happy to support you to do this to create even more buzz about the campaign. Last thing to remember is on the day of your event, be sure to have someone assigned to photography and social media so that it's not forgotten. And to connect to the national movement to see what else is going on that week by following #GoodFoodForAll. So the last and final piece to plan for is the day of action, the petition delivery day on Friday, March 20th. So it's obviously, to do this, you need to find out where the office of the president is, which should be available online, to print out a letter detailing the success of your campaign, and a link to the live petition so they can see all the folks who are ongoing and supporting the commitment. We have a draft letter for you to use for this. And we've also provided some creative ways you can make this delivery day even more exciting and fun and impactful. Regardless, this moment is a really awesome time to celebrate your campaign efforts so far. It's an opportunity to engage the media and to at least, in the very least, post a photo of the moment on social media and tag the office of the president, tag all your campus partners, and tag us so that we can share it too. Great, so that's the campaign in a nutshell. Before we have a chance for some questions, I just wanted to wrap up by mentioning ways to adjust your campaign based on your capacity. So whether you're lower on time or you have less students involved, there's definitely ways to make this campaign more accessible to your campus. So some important things to keep in mind are to take things step by step to avoid feeling overwhelmed. So the campaign guide is really organized step by step, and we'll be here to not overload with information all at once, but to send it along a realistic timeline. Setting up realistic petition goals will also help you feel empowered as you go through the campaign. As I mentioned, on the petitioning strategies slide, there's a lot of ways to mobilize the petition, but if you're limited on time, just focusing on a few of those key ways and doing them really well is much better than trying to overstretch yourself. So maybe just setting up one time to table in the lead up to Good Food Week and then focusing on social media or some other combination that meets your needs. Volunteers are also a great way to meet your goals on a limited time. So we can help you with techniques to engage with volunteers in a meaningful and helpful way to your campaign. And then for Good Food Week, it might make the most sense to plan a banner drop or tabling event if you're lower on planning time, while a cooking workshop or a rally is more feasible with a higher capacity. Whatever form your campaign ends up taking, we're here to support you, so be sure to reach out. Great, so before a Q&A, just a few next steps. So if everyone could, if you're on your computer or on your phone, just pull up this survey and take a few minutes after the workshop to just fill it out and give us some feedback. We would really appreciate it. This is where you can also let us know how you'd like to be involved in the campaign, and we can follow up. Also, feel free to send us personal messages to the GFC email that's on this slide. And a last reminder to save the date for the National Student Food Summit. The date will be hopefully released within the next month, so keep your eyes open for that. We'd love to have you there.